Yes. Welcome to the Only Football channel. My name is Kyle, and as always, this is the Only Football channel. I got to say, man, I have been in the dungeon, if you know what I mean. Um, I told you guys that I was going to make it my life's mission for the next couple days to figure out a better way that we can do the strength of schedule because quite frankly it is extremely lazy, and honestly there's entirely way too many people getting paid millions and millions of dollars that have yet to put this together in a way that actually makes sense. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is going to be an episode for the football nerds. If you like getting into the weeds and you enjoy analytics, next gen stats, that stuff, this is going to be a really good time. But if you don't, I apologize ahead of time, but this needed to be done. And I will say it was 2 episodes ago. I believe it was Wednesday, Only Football with Kyle. And I mentioned that the strength of schedule was incredibly lazy because all it did was pull the wins and losses from the season prior. Okay. And the reason I say it was extremely lazy is because, as we know, the NFL is always changing and evolving and using last season's data to try to come up with the picture of how this year is going to work is just incredibly difficult to do. Bill is in the chat. What's going on, Bill? He said, well, I got to learn FB nerd sometimes, so let's get it. So, okay. So anyway, 2 days after I had said that video that the strength of schedule is kind of just lazy, it's not really done, Rich Eisen went on. He has his own show that streams on Peacock, which Bill's about to end up getting because the Giants are probably going to maybe be one of those teams in the NFC playoffs. But, and just for everybody that doesn't know what we're talking about, Peacock is going to be streaming the NFL playoffs this year. It's the first time ever that NFL playoff game will be streamed. And I didn't realize that this was such a hot debate until I looked at the comments. My first reaction was, I don't really think it matters because if you guys know this, maybe you don't, but Peacock was streaming Sunday night football games last year. But if you have cable, you could still watch it on NBC. It wasn't like one or the other. It was just an option on Peacock. So I still think that's what they're doing. It's just the first time that Peacock will be able to stream a playoff game, because last year they were just doing regular season. So I will have to look into it a little more in depth. But Peacock is incredibly easy to have. And if you're a person like me that couldn't afford Sunday ticket, or a person like me that lives in an area where DirecTV was not available, you were kind of shit out of luck all last season for watching football games. So when streaming options came up, it was embraced by a lot of people. So for every person out there that is upset that they buy cable and now they have to get this stupid app, just know that there are people out there like me that are absolutely in love with this football, especially around the playoffs and stuff like that, and prime time, all of that. And Peacock was kind of the way that I was able to watch football last year. So um, anyway, that was a total sidebar. But Rich Eisen went on his show and he was talking about who has the hardest schedule in the NFL. And he was saying, a lot of people are saying the Eagles. And then he goes, I'm going to start by saying that the NFL, the way they do the strength of schedule, just throw that away because it's completely garbage. It uses last season's analytics. I mean, it was like exactly what I said 2 days prior. And I'm actually going to post a link in the comments of this video of Rich Eisen's video because he goes on to talk about how there were 6 teams last year that made the playoffs that didn't make them the year before. The year before that, there were 5 teams that made the playoffs. So, and he keeps going back. I think he went back a total of 4 years, but the point was is that every year there is new teams that surface. Nobody thought the Giants were going to be good last year, and they got off to a great start. No one thought the Jets were a quarterback away until the end of the season. The NFL changes rapidly. I mean, you had Tennessee was a first seed not too long ago, and last year they were depleted by injuries. I mean, there's just so many things that you can't predict, and even the best teams in the NFL have to deal with injuries. Now, we knock on wood and hope it's not somebody that is like Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts or one of the, stars of the league, but they are human too, and it can happen. Every quarterback at some point in a long career has established many injuries. Even Tom Brady, the legend of Matt Castle, was born when he missed football with his knee. And anyway, it's just such an unpredictable. But what we can do is find a way to try to accurately assess how strong your schedule is going to be without using last season's data. Now, when I say that, I don't mean like let's just throw it away, because I do think that last season data is good. Is it data or data? I hear it both ways. But it does help us understand, like a team like Jacksonville, they ended the season on a playoff loss, but I would bet right now that they end up with more wins than they had last season. Okay. So just knowing kind of the direction of where teams are trending is very helpful. A team like the Jets, right? Now we know that they are probably going to win more games that they won last year, not just because they added Aaron Rodgers, but because last season they showed that they could play pretty dominant on the defensive side of the ball all season. Like, let's use that. Find the stuff that we can use, and let's throw away the stuff that is lazy. Okay. But now, with that said, I had kind of a predicament because I knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure exactly how to accomplish it. How do you come up with an accurate assessment without, getting too scope locked on last season? And the best way that I could figure out how to do this was to basically create an algorithm. It's almost like math. And I wanted to go through the algorithm first. Okay. The first thing that I thought that I should do is go on to DraftKings, go on to Las Vegas, FanDuel, basically anybody that is big in the online betting world, and pull the numbers from the over under that they're projected to win this year, right? So we're already throwing away the wins and losses last year. And I will go through them really quick just so we are on the same page. I want to walk through this kind of slow because if I go too fast, it's just going to be too much and it's not going to make sense. I'll also warn you that I was only able to do 4 teams because I spent the entire time creating the algorithm. And until it was fully created, um, I couldn't apply it to any teams. So I pulled 4 teams and I started building it the way I would. And then I would see holes in my own theory and I would fix those. So it did take an incredible length of time for only 4 teams. But now that I got it down, I will be releasing every team. But the ones I did do, I made sure that fans of this channel got to get a look at it first. So I did the Giants. I did the Eagles just because there's plenty of Eagle fans out there. I did the Colts for Jinja, and I did the Broncos for me. And I'll start by going over the over-unders for every team. And I'll just do the over, okay, for the wins losses. So if you don't bet or you never heard of this, basically there will be a number like Arizona Cardinals 5.5, And that is the house basically saying, if you want to bet on Arizona, you have to say that they'll win 6 games, or you can take the under, and if they win 5 games, then that would hit. So you're basically kind of stuck where you have to decide, are they going to win 5 games or less, or are they going to win 6 games or more? That's how an over under works. And depending on the higher quality of a team, the higher that number will be. Um, One thing that I find a little frustrating is that, the house always wins, so it makes sense. But a lot of these teams, you will see that, um, in any regular season, there's a team that ends up with 1 to 3 wins, the laughing stock of the league. And then there's a team like the Eagles that wins, um, you know, all of their games but two, something like that, which is a ginormous margin. But if you look at the regular season, the way it opens up, you have the Arizona Cardinals, who are on the very bottom, right? And you have to say that they're going to win 6 games if you want to take the over. And then, um, yeah, and the Houston Texans are at 5.5 as well. And then the highest team in here is Kansas City, San Francisco, and San Francisco, and they're at 11.5. So a lot of the teams, even though we know that by the end of the season it's going to be all over the place, the NFL kind of does it where you only have a window this big, and it makes it really difficult because they are they're making you bet on bad teams, and they're making you kind of go all in on good teams. Either way, it's kind of a bad situation. So if I only use the over unders for the strength of schedule, meaning I only add up what DraftKings is saying the over under is, and I go through every one of your opponents and I add it all up, it's going to be very close to every other team in the league because they are all very close together. So you wouldn't really have a great assessment on who's got a really tough schedule and who doesn't, because let's say I added all of them up, and I added all of them up, and the Giants were at 135, and then a really easy schedule like the Colts were at 125. Doesn't really tell the whole story. It makes it seem like they're kind of close. So you have to find ways to accurately reflect the parts of the schedule that are going to be difficult, even more than just who they're playing, where they're playing, how far they're playing, how many away games are they playing in a row, how many home games are they playing in a row, who are they playing that's coming off of a bye week, who are they playing after they come off of bye week. Okay, so I will go through the over-unders. Arizona, 5.5. The Atlanta Falcons, 7.5. I do think that is pretty high, but they did add a lot of talent. Baltimore Ravens, 8.5. Buffalo Bills, 10.5. Carolina Panthers, 7.5. Chicago, 7.5. Cincinnati, 11.5. Cleveland, 8.5. Dallas, 9.5. Denver, 8.5. Detroit, over 9. Green Bay, 7.5. Houston, 5.5. Colts, 6.5. Jacksonville, 9.5. Kansas City, 11.5. Chargers, 9.5. Rams, 7.5. Raiders, 7.5. Miami, 9.5. Minnesota, 8.5. Patriots, 7.5. Saints, 9.5. Giants, 8.5. Jets, 9.5. Philly, 10.5. Pittsburgh, 8.5. 49ers, 11.5. Seattle, 11.5. Seattle, 8.5. Tampa, 6.5. Tennessee, 7.5. And Washington, 7.5. So as you can see, these are very close together. So if all we did was add up the opponents, everyone in the NFL would have a similar number. Okay, so this is the way the algorithm is going to work. I basically created rules, and I'm gonna go through them first. Okay, so the first rule is that if you're playing an away game back to back, we are going to do what's called +2. Okay, because The higher the number, the more difficult the schedule. The lower the number, the easier the schedule. So for things that are going against you, we're going to be adding. For things that are helping you, we're going to be subtracting. So because playing 2 away games back to back is very difficult, we are going to add 2 if you're playing back to back. If you're playing back to back to back, which would be 3 away games in a row, we're going to add 3. Okay. And we're also going to add 1 point for teams coming off of a bye. So if you're playing a team, or I'm sorry, add 2 points for teams coming off of a bye. So if you're playing a team that is coming off of a bye week, we're going to add 2 because that gives them an advantage. Okay. But just like that, we're also going to subtract 2 if you're coming off of a bye, and whoever you're playing, we're going to minus 2. So it will even out. Now, usually it's just +2, -2, but if you're the team that's playing at home, so let's say you're coming off of a bye week and you're at home, and this is only relevant if you have 2 teams that are, let's say they have the same bye week and then the next week they play each other. Whoever is playing at home will have the advantage for that bye week. Okay. So, um, add 2 if they play back. So for opposite coasts. So I was trying to figure out how to really come up. And actually, this is the very beginning of what I did. I actually found a way to make this more accurate. I was trying to figure out how to reflect the difficulty it is to be traveling from, let's say, New York to San Francisco. Um, and I came up with this idea and I was like, okay, well, I'll just do flight hours. So the flight from New Jersey to San Francisco is 6 hours and 3 minutes. So I thought about it and I was like, we'll just do for every hour, we'll do 1. So if it's 6.5 hours, it'd be 6.5. Okay. And I was doing that, and then I ran into a problem. And that problem is um, just the length of a flight doesn't really tell the whole story about the challenges. For instance, a 3 hour flight, or let's say a 4 hour flight from the Northeast all the way down to Miami, is not the same as going west, right? Because if you go from the Northeast down to Miami, you're staying in the same time zone. So, what I did was I implemented a time zone rule. So, if you are going to be traveling into another time zone, if you go through one time zone, then we are going to double it. So now it's times 2 for every hour you're flying. If you're going to skip 2 time zones, like when Denver goes to Miami, then you're going to multiply it by 3. Okay. And if you are playing Seattle, like let's say the Giants play Seattle, we are going to take the flight hours and we're going to multiply it by 4. Okay. Now, there is an exception to this, and I had to come up with this because I found a hole in Denver's schedule. And here's the example that I'm going to give you. When Denver plays Detroit, they are going to be technically jumping 2 time zones since Detroit is in Eastern time and Denver is in Mountain time. However, the flight is only 2 hours and 45 minutes. So to multiply Denver's 2 hour flight times 3 wouldn't be an accurate assessment of how difficult that travel really is. So I ended up making criteria. Your flight must equal 2 hours per time zone. Okay. So if you're jumping 2 time zones, in order to get credit for that, you have to have at least a 4 hour flight. That gets rid of some of these, I'm on the border of East and Central time, and technically I'm jumping to. We want this to be as freaking accurate as possible. So there is going to be that criteria, and Denver, Detroit is the perfect example because that's when I realized that it was flawed. So it's only a 2 hour, 45-minute flight from Denver to Detroit. We're not going to treat that, the same way as when, let's say, the Giants fly to Denver. Okay. That is a much different story and it shouldn't be treated the same. So that is pretty much all of the rules for right now. So I'm going to go through the New York Giants as kind of a startup, and we'll go through it pretty slow. And then we got the Colts in here too, and then the Broncos. So for week one, the and everyone knows this now, but the Giants are playing Dallas. Okay. So this is how it would look practically. Dallas is over under is 9.5. That is our base starting point for every team. What they are predicted to be this year has nothing to do with last year. The Giants are at home for this game. This is a very simple one. The total is 9.5. There's nothing to add or subtract. Okay. The next week, the Giants are playing Arizona. Okay. And this is going to be a road game. So, Arizona, we start with 5.5. That is their win total. And then you look at the flight from New Jersey to Arizona, and it's a 5-hour flight, 5 hour and 8 minutes, but we just put 5 hours. Okay. And because they're jumping 3 time zones, we're going to multiply that times 4. So that's plus 20. Okay. We have to account how difficult it is for your bodies to adjust to time zones. Okay. So Arizona, you get plus 20 for that 5 hours times 4. And then you do the 20 plus the 5.5, which is their over under to start the season. And you get 25.5. The next week, they play San Francisco. And this is a road game for the Giants. So we start off with 11.5. That is the 49ers over under. And then we're going to add 2 because they're playing back to back away games. So now we're at 13.5. And then we do the same thing. They're jumping 3 time zones. It's a 6. Let's see. I got it here. It is a 6-hour flight. So we multiply that times 4 and we get 24. And that equals 37.5. Okay. The next week is a home game. Thankfully, they're hosting Seattle. That would have been a pain in the ass to fly back to the West Coast. But look, this week 2 and week 3, 25.5 and 37.5 is a pretty high score. Even though Arizona is supposed to be the laughing stock of the league this year, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I have a better understanding of how difficult these games are going to be because they are jumping 3 time zones. Then they're flying back to New York, and then they're getting back on the plane and going to San Francisco to play one of the most physical teams. And we know that teams that played San Francisco last year were 0-16 last year. Bill said, new wrinkle for your algorithm. Pretty sure the team is staying on the West Coast between the Cardinals 49ers game since there's only 4-day difference. They requested it on the schedule that way. Now, that is the case. There's the same thing with the Rams where they are playing. I think it's the Indianapolis Colts, and that is on a Monday night, or the Sunday before the Monday night, they're playing another East Coast game. So, personally, like, I was watching, people talk about this and they were saying, what are they going to do? Are they going to stay out there? And the assumption was that unless have some inside sources, I don't really, I can't really predict which teams are and aren't going to stay in the West Coast. But, even if they are having to stay in the West Coast, I still think that that is a factor. That is still something. You're not at home, you're not with your family, you're on the road. When you're not at home, like, especially for the guys that are married, they may feel like they're not balanced. They're not getting laid, whatever the case is, they just might feel a little off. I don't think the fact that teams may be staying in the West Coast for a longer period of time, you could make an argument that it helps them. You could make an argument that it doesn't help them. But either way, one thing we do know is that it is an obstacle that needs to be accounted for. But no, thank you for bringing that up, because that is a great point, and I've already heard some teams kind of have to go through this similar problem. Um, Bill said, I only brought it up because you were talking about the flight hours. Oh, okay. Well, okay, so you said pretty sure the team is traveling on the West Coast. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have like, we're going to move on here, but I just, it is probably a wrinkle if they stay out there, but like I said, I have no idea if they're going to do that or not. So, let's just assume for the sake of this, that they don't, and we're going to add in the 49ers 37.5. That is a very high score. That is actually the highest score of any game. So, I mean, this could very well be your hardest game all year. Then you have Seattle at home, 8.5. Miami, 9.5. Flight time, 2.5. We don't multiply anything because it's the East Coast. We're staying in the same time zone. So that will be a total score of 12. Buffalo. Now, this is back-to-back away games, Miami and then Buffalo. 2 back-to-back away games. So we're going to add 2 to 10.5, which gets us to 12.5, and then 1.5 for the flight time, and that gives you a 14. Washington, 7.5. It's a home game, so that's it, 7.5. New York, this is the Jets game. That's a 9.5, but then we minus 2 because this is a back-to-back home game. So that'll take you to 7.5. Las Vegas, 7.5. Flight time, 5.5. So that flight right there is 5. We do 5.5 for every hour, but the time zones I didn't account for the time zones. So it would be I can't remember. Is Las Vegas in Mountain or West Coast? I'll find out right now. They're in West Coast time. So that's 3. So it would be 5.5 times 4, which would be, oh yeah, where is it? Where'd it go? Las Vegas. Here it is. Okay, so I did account for it. So that'll be a total of 29.5. I accounted for it, but I didn't show my math, so I thought I didn't. So 29.5. That's a pretty high score as well. That's your second highest so far, and that'll be your second highest all game. So, a game that on paper you're like, the Raiders, especially if you're using last season's data, they're not expected to be very good this year. So, I mean, this kind of helps you see some of the opponents that you play in a different light. Like, why is this my second, highest score? And maybe it's not so surprising if the Raiders play a close game, or, God forbid they end up winning this one. It's not as confusing as maybe it is, for people that don't really follow the sport and they just know the Raiders suck and then they see that they got beat. Bill said, oh, now I get it. Higher the number, the harder the challenge. Yeah. So no, you're totally good. I'm surprised that you're, even understanding it, because I wasn't sure how this was going to, how effectively I'd be able to explain this without sounding like I'm just, the only one in the world that can understand this, because I created it, and you can't tell if you're like, is this genius or stupid? Because if nobody can understand it, it's probably dumb. So that lets me know that we're on the right track. Dallas, right after the Raiders. Okay. 9.5, add 2 because it's a back-to-back away game. And you're jumping 1 time zone. So it's a 4-hour flight, but we're going to multiply it times 2 for the 1 time zone. And you get 8. So total 19.5. Okay, so this is, even though it's just the Cowboys in a divisional game, I know the Giants haven't been able to get that monkey off their back in a couple years, but this will probably be your fourth or fifth hardest game this season. Then you got the Commanders, which is going to be your third away game in a row. Now, this is usually, if you just told me Giants Commanders who wins, if I'm not really deep into that schedule, I go Giants every time. And I still will go Giants, but I'm just gonna have probably a closer game in mind. This is their third away game in a row at this point. So 7.5 for the Commanders, then plus 3 because they're going back to back to back, and then plus 1 for flight time. It's just a 1 hour flight, no time zone change. And a simple game is turned into an 11.5, which, I mean, you look at week 1 and you play Dallas, and that's a 9.5. Now, all of a sudden, a Commanders game in the middle of the season, you haven't had a bye week yet. You're on your third road game in a week. I mean, third road game in the month. You haven't been at home. You've been to Dallas. You've been to Las Vegas. Now you're going to Commanders. This is a tough game. Then you got the New England Patriots. And I gave you guys plus 1 because you're coming off of a bye week here. So, or no, New England's coming off of a bye week. So I added plus 2. Okay. So not in your favor because the Giants are at home. I subtracted 1. Okay. So I ended up going plus 1 when it was all said and done. So 7.5 is the over under for the Patriots. It ended with an 8.5. They get an extra point just because Bill Belichick is a great head coach. And now you're giving them 2 weeks to prep for a game. The Giants will be at home. That is kind of the only thing helping kind of tilt the scale back down. Then week 13, the Giants get a bye week. Now they are the second of last team, or there's only one more week possible to get your bye week. So this is the second of the last week that the Giants could have gotten their bye. So it's fair to say they get a bye week pretty damn late. Week 13. Okay, then week 14, they're playing the Green Bay Packers, but here's the thing. Now they're coming off of a bye. The Giants are, and I also see that they're playing a home game. So this is actually a back-to-back home game if you count the New England Patriots being a home game. So even though they spend 3 weeks on the road from the Vegas, Dallas to the Commanders, now all of a sudden they are spending 3 weeks at home, with one of those being a fully good bye week. The Giants should be in great shape when they play the Green Bay Packers. They're 7.5 over under for the Packers is going to be -2 because they're coming off of a bye, minus another 2 because it's back-to-back home games. And this takes this game all the way down to a 3.5, which is actually the lowest score of any opponent this season. So, things are looking pretty good for the Giants. Usually the Packers and Giants play a pretty tough game. We'll see. But by the way, this has nothing to do with, just to draw a hard line here. This has nothing to do with predicting who wins these games. Because let's say the Packers go all the way down to a 1. Am I saying that the Packers are not going to be able to beat the Giants because they're the weakest opponent? Not at all. All I'm doing is standardizing some basic rules and establishing a point system so I can see who really has the tougher schedule with all of the factors that I could think of in mind. This is only about strength of schedule. So if a really good team ends up dropping down to a 2, it is not a reflection on that team and how good they are. It's more of a reflection on where you're meeting that team on the schedule and all the factors that led to that game. So right after the Packers game, you have the New Orleans Saints, who are 9.5 over under to start the season. It is a 3-hour flight. Multiply that times 2 because you're jumping one time zone. So we add 6. That takes the Saints game to a 15.5. Then you have the Philadelphia Eagles for the first time of the year, late in the season, and this is going to be an away game. The Eagles are 10.5 over unders. We're going to add 2 because you have back-to-back away games. And so now you're at a 12.5, and then add another 1 for the 1-hour flight, and that takes that game to a 13.5. In your last 2 games, the Los Angeles, I believe it was the Rams, and the Rams game is going to be a home game for you guys. So 7.5, that is your total, 7.5. And then your final game versus the Eagles at home. The Eagles are 10.5 minus 2 for your back-to-back home games. And that takes that down to an 8.5. So all in all, the Giants' total score is 239.5. Okay? So one thing that I think a lot of people haven't realized is that the Giants have 28 hours and 32 minutes of travel time. That is a lot of traveling. You got 5 hours to Arizona, 6 hours to San Francisco, 5.5 hours to Las Vegas, a couple 3-hour flights to Dallas and New Orleans. I mean, there are some teams that have literally the opposite of what you have going on here. And as long as I've standardized the algorithm, I can apply it to any team, and I can, as long as I'm playing by the same rules, I can see who really has a harder schedule. Philly, on a lot of the schedules I'm seeing now, are ranked to have the hardest schedule in the league. I did Philly, and I did it by all the same rules, and Philly actually scored 206, and the Giants were at 240. But look, that's why you just don't go off of, oh, what's the win-loss column from last season? Who cares? There's going to be entirely new teams that are going to be successful. There's going to be teams like the Vikings that are going to fall back. That's just super lazy. So I feel like unless, there's an Eagles fan out there that wants to, for street cred purposes to, have the hardest schedule, maybe I'll get some pushback for this, but I really can't imagine anybody out there having an issue with this. This is much more accurate than anything that we're seeing on, any of these websites. So the Colts have kind of an opposite situation going on, and this is for Jinja. He's got week 1, the Jaguars, which is a 9.5, and a 9.5. Really quick. Bill said you have a brain for logistics with this system, but I get it now. Yeah, thank you. My girlfriend was saying the same thing. She was like, "Oh, you must really love this." It was like, "Yeah, get out." Okay, so week 1 for the Colts, they're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they're going to be at home. Simple, 9.5. That's the over-under for Jacksonville this year. Week 2, they play the Houston Texans. That's a 5.5 plus 1 time zone. So a 2.5-hour flight is going to now be 5 because we're multiplying it by 2. And it turns the Texans into a 10.5. The Ravens, week 3. This is a back-to-back away game. The Ravens start at 9.5 plus 2. Takes you to 11.5 plus an hour and a half of flight time. That's a 13. And would you believe it if I told you that this is the second hardest game on the schedule for the Colts? It's pretty incredible. Week 4, they play the Los Angeles Rams, but guess what? They are at home. So that is a 7.5. Week 5, they are playing the Tennessee Titans, and they're at home. So that's going to take the Tennessee Titans 7.5 down to a 5.5. Week 6, they're going to Jacksonville. So this is going to be 9.5 plus 2 for the flight hours. That takes it to an 11.5. Then week 7, they play the Cleveland Browns at home. You notice that this is alternating very well. We haven't had to subtract or add to very much in this schedule. Whereas the Giants, we were like, oh, add 2, add 3, back to back to back away games. Like this is very more, much more friendly. Okay, so the Cleveland Browns game is at home, 8.5. Then you have week 8, the New Orleans Saints, 9.5, -2 for back-to-back home games. That takes it to a 7.5. Week 9, they play at Carolina, so 7.5 plus 1.5 for the flight time. That is a 9. Then week 10, they play at New England. That will be 7.5. And then that is their second away game in a row, so +2, plus another 2 for the flight hours takes it to an 11.5. And then week 12, they play the Tampa Bay Bucks. That will be the only challenging thing, or challenging for Tampa, not the Colts. The Colts are coming off of a bye week here, so -2 because they're going to be ready to go. That takes Tampa from a 6.5 down to a 4.5. That should be a winnable game. Week 13 at Tennessee. So 7.5 plus 1 for the flight time, 1 hour. That's an 8.5. Week 14, they play the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals open up as 11.5, and then you're going to do +2 because this is 2 road games in a row. That will take them to a 14.5 after you add the 1 hour of flight time. Week 15 is the Steelers. That's a home game, 8.5, simple. Week 17, Las Vegas Raiders, home game, simple, 7.5. Week 18, Houston Texans, 5.5, -2 because it's back-to-back home games. That takes that game down to a 3.5, which means that the total for the Colts is 150. Now look how different that scores out from the Giants. We got done with the Giants and we were at 239.5. And we just finished with 152 for the Colts. The Colts also don't ever play an opponent that is coming off of a bye week. It just never happens. And if you do look at their long flights that they would play, the Rams, Tampa, and the Raiders are the only 3. They're all home games. None of their actual distance games. Those are games that are going to be challenging for them. The Colts, right? Because there's 2 ways to look at it. One, yes, it's easy for the Colts, but B, it's difficult for the opponent. Both are good. Both are very important, right? So maybe that's something that should be added to the algorithm, is if the opponent coming, travels 2 time zones, then we subtract. But then I'll just maybe get too far into it. We'll see. But what I do know is that the Colts are flying an hour and 55 minutes to Jacksonville, 2 hours and 30 minutes to Houston, 1 hour and 40 minutes to Baltimore, 1 hour and 40 minutes to Charlotte, 2 hours to New England, 1 hour to Nashville, 42 minutes to Cincinnati, and 1.5 hours to Atlanta. Look, the Colts schedule may be the easiest schedule in the NFL. I haven't done the others, but I'm telling you, this is going to be hard to beat. They have away games, but are you kidding me? Dude, the Giants are going to Vegas, and then they got to go up to San Francisco. I mean, you're on the opposite side of the country. I mean, the Colts away game is like you could just push the airplane down the highway. I mean, it's a 45. Are they even going to fly to some of these games? I would doubt it. They might as well just drive a bus. But man, the Colts are in pretty good shape. All of the games that would be difficult road games are going to be difficult for Tampa, the Raiders, and the Rams. So when I look at the over-unders, gosh, I gave my dog a haircut, and I feel like their little tiny hairs are like in my nose still. But look at this. The over under for Indianapolis is 6.5. Okay. And I think after looking at this schedule, I maybe would be inclined to go over. There's just a lot of winnable games there. And I hate to, be a bearer of bad news. I really don't want to, but I got to say with the Giants, um damn, dude. I mean, it's looking kind of tough. And trust me, Denver's is pretty tough too, but do you think the Giants are still going to be able to make it into the postseason? Are they going to win a lot of these games? Because they do get difficult right away, and they stay difficult, and you're in a tough division. And just like Philly is in your division and Dallas is in your division, the only difference is it seems like the Giants got the shit end of the stick when it comes to how the opponents are one thing, but how the opponents fell as far as what games you travel to and when, that's where I feel like the Giants got it kind of screwed, compared to everyone else in that division. So I had to do my Denver Broncos just to see what was Denver going to kind of fall, because now because I did a difficult team. I thought Philly was going to be difficult. That's why I did them first, because I wanted to be able to have, a really difficult team. And then I did the Colts, and I didn't realize it until I did the Giants. But I basically, right now, I have a ceiling and a floor kind of going on. So I wanted to do Denver to see where does it line up inside of there. Bill said Colts being in the middle of the country provides a benefit in your algorithm. Makes sense. Yeah, that is very true. They're very reachable from different areas. And he said that is the exact end of the stick we got. So you look at Philly, okay? Because I feel like as a Giants fan, you probably are curious about Philly. Keep your friends close type deal, enemies closer. Well, here's Philly. Okay. Philly is got a lot of things that seem difficult, but then in a weird way, it kind of works out for them. I'll give you an example. The Eagles are playing the Chiefs week 11. It's going to be Monday night. Should be a very good game. Kansas City's coming off of a bye from week 10. Seems like a kind of bad deal until you look closer and see that the Eagles are coming off of a week 10 bye. Both these teams are coming off a week 10 bye. So there was a little bit of that going on where right when I thought, this is why, I saw, wait, the Eagles have it too. So week 1, they played the Patriots. Okay, 7.5 plus an hour and a half flight, 8.5. Minnesota Vikings, Prime Video, 8.5. They're at home. At Tampa, 6.5 plus 2.5 hour flight from Philly to Tampa takes you to an 8.5. Commanders, this is a home game, 6.5. Simple as that, 6.5. So you see, so far it's going pretty well. At the Los Angeles Rams. Now here's your first difficult game, and it's not because of the opponent, but more the time zones. You jump 3 time zones. It is a 6-hour flight. 6 times 4 is 24 plus the 6.5. That's the Rams over under. And you got a 30.5 game week 5. It's just the Rams, but it looks so far like one of your hurdles that may be sneaky. That's a sneaky hurdle. That is not the one people would circle. New England, Minnesota, and maybe even the Commanders, because they were the first team to beat Philly last year. They would probably circle all those games before they gave the Rams a shot in hell at beating the Eagles. But just like the Commanders were sneaky last year, nobody thought the Commanders were going to beat Philly. the Rams might have a sneaky good game right here. Then they go at New York Jets. Okay, so 2 away games in a row. We're going to add 2 to their 9.5 that they're opening with. That's an 11.5. Then they play versus the Miami Dolphins. This is going to be on NBC at Sunday Night Football. That's a 9.5. Simple. Washington Commanders, 6.5 away game. So add 1 hour, 7.5. Dallas Cowboys, 9.5. This is a home game, so it stays at 9.5. Week 10, they hit their bye. And then week 11 was a little crazy. If you saw my screen, I wanted to upload it onto here, but it was kind of difficult. But week 11, Monday night, November 20th, Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City opens up as 11.5 over under, plus 2 points because Casey's coming off of a bye, minus 2 points because Philly's coming off of a bye. But I added 1 point because Philly is on the road, KC's at home. 1 point goes back to KC. And then the flight time. They are crossing one time zone. It is a 3-hour flight, but they get a 6 because of the time zone. And that takes you to an 18.5. So that should be an interesting game. And honestly, I would probably think that in a more accurate algorithm, because I'm still building this, if you're coming off of a bye, I should probably divide by 2 whatever your number is for flight time. So if your flight time times 4, because you're going from the East Coast to the West Coast, maybe divide by 2 for anyone coming off of a bye, because traveling is a lot different when you've had 14 days to prepare for a game versus you're in the thick of it and now you're traveling. So I'll probably account for that on a future version that, this is going to continue to evolve. So, okay. So then the Kansas City game, then they play Buffalo. So they're playing Buffalo at home. That's a 10.5. Then they play versus the San Francisco 49ers. This 3-game stretch is the real deal. But one thing that you got to, because if you just look at this, you're like the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Niners. Shit. Then they play the Cowboys and the Seahawks, and then the Giants. I mean, that's a tough stretch. But let's take this one game at a time, which is probably what Jalen Hurts would say. They are playing the Chiefs off of a bye week. So that is clutch. Okay. Then the next 2 games, even though they're difficult, San Francisco does have to fly across the entire country to come to Philly. And then Buffalo also has to come into Philly. Philly should be scaring these teams. They shouldn't be looking at Buffalo or San Francisco like, oh, we got to play San Francisco. It's like, no, I mean, Philly went to the Super Bowl, so I think even though that this 3-game stretch is kind of looks brutal on paper, I think Philly will be able to stand the test here, just because the way it worked out. Had San Francisco been in the middle of these 3 games and been a road game, I would say this would probably look entirely different. This is the difference between 2 losses and 2 wins. Had the 49ers game been on the road in the middle, they probably would have lost to the 49ers. And then, like I said, last year, the week after playing the 49ers, teams were 0-16, which means they probably would have gotten beat up because 49ers are so physical, and they probably would have lost to the Bills. But the 49ers is the 3rd game, not the 2nd. It's not in the middle, and they're both at home. Looks pretty, solid. It looks doable. And then week 14, they got at Dallas Cowboys for the first time, Sunday Night Football. 9.5 plus 7 for the flight time, because it is a 3.5 hour flight, and they're jumping one time zone. That takes that to a 13. Then week 15 at Seattle. This is their highest score that they get because it is back-to-back away games. So I added 2 onto the 8.5 to make 10.5. And then they're jumping 3 time zones. So I did 6. It's a 6-hour flight exactly times 4. 24 plus 10.5 is 34.5. So this is going to be on paper, it's just the Seahawks, not terribly difficult, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to beat Kansas City, beat Buffalo, beat the 49ers, and beat Dallas, and then end up stumbling to the Seahawks because of the buildup of the difficulty and the traveling would totally make sense to me. And then Monday night, which will also be Christmas, they are playing the Giants and they're at home for that. So that's a 7.5. And then week 17, December 31st, they're playing the Cardinals. That's a home game, thankfully, because Arizona's quite a way away. And then -2, because this is back-to-back home games, Giants and Cardinals. That takes the Cardinals game down to a 2.5. So pretty impressive. And then week 18's to be determined, but it will be the Giants, and it will be an away game. So 7.5. So 206 total. Philly's the only team that's coming off a bye and playing a team that's also coming off of a bye. So that is really helpful. And then you look at the flights that they have. 2 hours and 40 minutes to Tampa, 5 hours and 55 minutes to LA, 6 hours to Seattle, 3 hours and 40 minutes to Dallas. I mean, there's some long flights here, 24 hours and 17 minutes of flight time for the Philadelphia Eagles, 206 total points, but we just graded out the Giants and we were at 239. So it does look like the Giants have a harder schedule than Philly, in my opinion, even though some of the opponents are more difficult. There are other factors to consider. 1 second, I'll be right back. You turn that off? Thank you. Sorry about that. There was a vacuum cleaner going on up there. So 28 minutes and 32. So Bill is saying right here. Oh no, I read that one already. So yeah, I mean, the Giants don't necessarily have that same stretch that the Eagles have. I mean, that is a playoff team, back to back to back. So that's pretty difficult. But at the same time, man, the way the games are placed is what's really important. Where you have your bye week is really important. Like especially there are teams, like I said, that you just don't want to play in September. Kansas City, you don't want to play in September. Sean McVay, even though the Rams kind of bad last year, not kind of, they were, but you don't want to play Sean McVay in September because he's also a really good offensive coach. He implements a lot of new things during the offseason. Bill Belichick hasn't really historically been a great September coach. They've normally gotten hot in October. So, just knowing your opponents is one thing, but when you play them is extremely important. And then also realizing, hey, we're on 3 road games in a row. And I will mention this. I haven't done the Rams yet, but I'm telling you right now, I think the Rams have the hardest schedule in the NFL. And I'm going to tell you why really quick. The Rams have, they open the season against the Seahawks. That's on the road. Okay. Then they play the 49ers. Okay. So those are 2 tough games and they're divisional. The Rams will be at home for the 49ers game. Then they play the Bengals on the road. And then they play the Colts on the road. So, I mean, the Bengals, this is the game I was talking about for the Bengals and the Colts. The Bengals is a Monday Night Football game, Super Bowl rematch, by the way. And then, so it is a short week, not as short as the Thursday night week, but it is short, 6 days. So do they stay or do they go back to Los Angeles? Indianapolis and Cincinnati, pretty close. We did it. It was a 45-minute flight. when I looked at it earlier today. So, I mean, do they just stay out there? Who knows? But one thing I do know about this schedule is that one, two, three, one of their first, they're going to be at week 5 and have only had one home game. One. And they're also playing the Seahawks, the Bengals, and the Niners, and the Colts. I mean, by the time the Rams get to that game, who knows how healthy the Rams are going to be. I mean, the fact that they're going to be playing the Bengals after the 49ers, I mean, that's not good either. Now the Bengals with their draft picks, they have definitely bolstered that defense they're going to be a lot more physical. They got the safety from Alabama. A lot of people's number one value pick for the Bengals this year was Miles Murphy from Clemson. I think the Bengals D is going to be pretty solid. But anyway, then they play the Colts. Then they play the Eagles. And you got in here the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Packers, the Seahawks again, the Ravens. And then this is another thing. They play, no other team has this. Okay. They have 4 games on their schedule where they are playing a team that's coming off of a bye week. So there's 4 times for the Rams. I believe it's 4, if not 3. I think it's 4 though, that they have to play a team that has been preparing for them for 2 weeks. They're usually, what I've seen so far is that there may be 1. Some teams have 0, like the Colts. But I've seen 2 teams that have 1, but 4. It's like, I mean, this is the kind of schedule that send the commissioner a letter and be like, "Hey, what the hell is this?" And then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 3 of their last 5 on the road. The 49ers game is the last game. Then they got the Ravens. In order, it goes Ravens, Commanders, Saints, and then Giants and Rams. Um, I just think the Rams have it really tough. And I mean, you look at this. I think I still have it open right here. The strength of schedule, and see where the Rams are. And so this is what it's showing here. It says number 1 is the Philadelphia Eagles. Stupid ad. Okay, here we go. Number 1 is the Philadelphia Eagles. Then the New England Patriots, Buffalo Bills, Kansas City, the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Commanders, the Chargers, the Jets, Vikings, Cowboys. I mean, where the Rams are in the middle. Do you guys think that the Rams have a middle tough schedule? Of course not. They just added the wins and losses from last year. Do you know how lazy you have to be to get paid millions of dollars to bring people NFL content and news and actually provide the public with this garbage? I can't believe that the standard hasn't been set like decades ago. You would think with next gen stats and all of these futuristic ways that we're approaching our game that we would have a better way of analyzing the type of schedule that we have. Bill said Rams have it tough. I wish the Giants would play them here at SoFi so I could go though. Never thought I'd be wishing for an away game. I feel the same way. When every year I was like, is Denver playing at Seattle? Is Denver playing at Seattle? And yeah, that's just the way it is when you live far away from home. Um, but yeah, I mean, you got probably another 4 years because they got every 4 years they play. Hold on one second. God, mother. Sorry about that. Never heard my dog make that sound before, and I was worried that he was choking or something. So yeah. More importantly, if you guys think that there is something that I should add to this algorithm, I'm totally open. So I did have one more thing I wanted to share. I still am a pen and paper kind of guy. Sorry that I had to leave twice today. I normally never do that. So this is something that I was going through, and I did mostly the AFC West for now because I'm in the AFC West. I'm a Broncos fan, so I wanted to know who draft-wise who people got. Because by this time we kind of have draft grades on everybody. We've seen a million draft grades. But I wanted to see if I could create something that was just about best value. So this is not necessarily a team's best pick, but the best value where they got the pick for the AFC West. And as I go through more teams, and if you want me to do your specific team, obviously I'll do the Giants for Bill, but anyone else, I'm going to end up doing all 32, but if you put a comment, I might get to it quicker. So Kansas City, round 4, 194 overall. They got Keandre Coburn. And he is he's a defensive end. And I was using next gen stats, and the Chiefs play more 2-high safety structure than almost any other team. Cover 2, cover 4, cover 5, cover 6. The Chiefs play 51.3% of the time, which is higher than any other team in the league. As you know, it's a lot harder to stop the run if both of your safeties are not in the box and on your defensive snaps. As per Pro Focus, when looking at different run schemes against the Chiefs defense last year, they allowed 4.4 yards per carry against inside zone calls, which is relatively average, but they allowed 4.8 yards per carry against duo calls. And duo calls, for if the people wondering, is this, basically. So you have a weak and a Mike linebacker. And if you can see here, the Mike, he's the read key. And his job, the read key right here, the Mike, his job is to see what the running back is doing. Okay. And follow the running back. His job is to read the running back. That's why they call him the read key. So anyway, inside zone calls, which is relatively average, but they allowed 4.8 against duo calls, which is man blocking scheme in between the tackler. They allowed 5.3 yards per carry against outside zone, which is arguably the most popular run scheme in the NFL. So, especially these days. So, if you're getting up 5.3 yards a carry to more of an outside run scheme with the NFL, especially these days, you're giving up 5.3 yards per carry to more and more running backs. You're going to struggle to keep the Dolphins off the field. You're going to struggle to contain the Jets, the Ravens, the Bengals, even the Steelers, the Colts, the Jags, Tennessee, even the Chargers. Kellen Moore loves to run outside zone out of a 12 personnel. If they can't stop the run scheme, this defense will struggle. So the fact that they got Keandre, who is an absolute mauler up front, that matters a lot. He can hold his ground against double teams if they try to run inside zone or duo right at him, but he's quick enough against outside zone. He's not going to get off, and he's not going to get outrun to the point where seams just open up right in front of him. So especially as far as just looking at the draft combine stuff on Keandre Coburn, or I think it's Coburn, he actually has pretty good speed. So they're going to basically have to run straight through him. Or if not, they're going to have to do a cut all the way back. And if they do cut all the way back, then they're going to run in through to Felix and Aduke Azomo. And there's other just dogs on Kansas City's defense, but this was a huge hole. This pick is going to do wonders for KC's run defense, which was honestly one of their only weaknesses left as a defense. And if they can improve that, that means that they can get teams off the field more often, which means Patrick Mahomes will be on the field more, which means there will be more opportunities to score, which means Kansas City will probably win more games. So that is a great example of best value. When you talk about best value, you have to really have a solid understanding of where teams are at and what they need, not just, oh, they got that guy, know who, that receiver is. It's not about that. The Raiders, they had a lot of solid picks this year, and I hate to say it because I'm a Broncos fan, but the one I picked here was in round 4, 135 overall, Aiden O'Connell, the quarterback out of Purdue. And it was kind of funny because I was watching a video on somebody that sat down with him during, the combine, and they were able to interview him for 30 minutes. And he said that he was incredibly impressed with the intelligence, the humility, the temperament. Everything about him just said that he was ready to start. He just kind of had that feel, when you're sitting down with like a 5-year veteran, he kind of felt like that, but right off the gate. The compare that, because everybody wants to do an NFL compare, the compare that I'm seeing is Kirk Cousins. Aggression on downfield throws can get him into trouble sometimes. He's very mature. Overall aggression is an overall good, not bad. When you look at a lot of the quarterbacks, the great quarterbacks, a lot of them are aggressive. And you can look at the next gen stats on how aggressive Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, they all have higher numbers than, say, Geno Smith. And there's nothing wrong with Geno Smith, but he, when you get to the point where, look, I don't have these crazy intangibles, but what I can do, I can be great at. I can protect the ball. I can move the ball downfield. I can let the plays open up. I can do less. And by doing less, it'll allow my teammates to do more. But the great quarterbacks, very aggressive. Kirk Cousins is aggressive. I wouldn't say he's great, but he's top 12. And that's another thing I wrote, is that comparing him to Kirk Cousins, I've noticed has been kind of almost like a knock on him. And I just want to clarify that it is not a knock to be compared to Kirk Cousins. Like, you were drafted in the 4th round. Kirk Cousins was drafted in the 4th round. And people say he's a top 12, top 15 quarterback in the league. Like, if you can be better than half of the quarterbacks in the league one day, this is a great pick in the 4th round. So from a value perspective, with Jimmy G's health concerns, having a solid backup is obviously a must. We have never really seen Jimmy Garoppolo stay healthy an entire season, at least not one that I remember. So I'm kind of excited to see how he's going to handle himself. If he gets the opportunity to start, I hope he sucks when he plays the Broncos. But I do think that he can be impressive. Now, he doesn't have the instincts, the eyes in the back of his head that Bryce Young has. He doesn't have the arm strength that CJ Stroud has. He just doesn't have some of those just wow factors, but he does handle himself well. He carries himself well. It's like the moment's not too big for him. He's very confident and good at what he can do. So I could see why Josh McDaniels, picked him, because Josh McDaniels picks a lot of quarterbacks, or at least the Patriots did in the past, that weren't, number one, and they didn't need to because they had Tom Brady. But still, you look at Jimmy Garoppolo and Matt Castle, and there's another guy I'm leaving out. Matt Castle, whatever. The Patriots draft a lot of guys that I don't want to say are average, but they were just like, oh, oh, that guy, that's who you wanted? That's not really sexy. But they've turned a lot of those guys into good quarterbacks. And Josh McDaniels, I think, low key, a lot of people I don't think are aware. I think this is who Josh McDaniels is trying to develop. He said that he wanted a quarterback for a very long time. And I think because it's Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue, it didn't really get a lot of publicity. But I do think that they are going to get right to work. And Jimmy Garoppolo, with his health, hopefully he's fine, but with his health issues, I believe that they are going to be prepping him for, um, starting in the NFL this season. So that's why I think that that is the highest value, is because there's nothing more important than having a quarterback. And um, the one thing more important than having a good quarterback, if your quarterback is brittle, is having a good backup quarterback. The Dolphins learned that last year. The Dolphins learned you need a backup to the backup because they had Bridgewater. But the point is that they had a backup, and Sean Payton really liked him and took him away from the Raiders. So now it's going to be O'Connell's job to lose from the moment he gets in. The Los Angeles Chargers, round 3, 85 overall. Um, I was trying to figure out how not to butcher this name. Dayan Henley from Washington State, linebacker, 6'1", 235 pounds, a little undersized, but he makes up with speed, agility, quickness, and instincts. He's a high 4'4", 40. And this is what was cool about him. Former quarterback, former wide receiver, former punt returner, athletic as hell, really slippery, really instinctual. This is a football player. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're athletes and then they're just football players. They just understand the game. They have the instincts. They are moving faster than the speed of the game. It feels like this guy's really instinctual. He's a great blitzer, great tackler, hard to beat to the edge. A lot more normal to have a 6'1", 225-pound linebacker in today's NFL than it was, say, 16 years ago. But this guy is able to do anything. And I do think that this guy should have probably been picked a lot sooner. But a lot of these guys that I noticed, like the next guy, he was Mr. Irrelevant. Joe, I'm trying to think, Jawan Johnson, but it's like Deshaun Johnson. That's what it is. Defensive end out of Toledo. A lot of times, people will just get kind of passed up on because they aren't playing really good competition. They're not in the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, and when you don't come from a really big college, it's hard to get the recognition. Sean Payton drafted a tight end while he was in New Orleans. A guy that was like, I think he went to a Division II school, a school I've never even heard of. And he loves this guy. And this guy was dominating Division II, and nobody drafted him because who gives a crap? It's Division II. Talk to me when you get to Alabama. Now, that's kind of the mentality. Like, if you were actually good, you wouldn't be playing at Toledo. You'd been in the transfer portal. But there are a lot of great players that don't go to the transfer portal. And some people just kind of have an old school mentality. Demaryius Thomas, his first year at Georgia Tech, and Demaryius Thomas broke like Rod Smith's record in Denver, like most receiving yards in a game. He's got a Super Bowl ring. Demaryius Thomas is one of the all-time great Denver receivers. A lot of people forget how good that offense was. In 2013, by week 5, Denver had scored more points in the first 5 weeks in the season than any team in the history of the NFL. Not even the Patriots in the 2010 year when Tom Brady threw like 50 touchdown passes. So, and I mean, Manning threw 55. That's how this was an insane year. And Demaryius Thomas really was elite. But anyway, when he was drafted, he was a basketball player, and he was like out of high school. His mom and grandma both got arrested because they wouldn't snitch on each other. So he had to go live with his aunt and uncle. and he just kind of hung around the basketball, and Georgia Tech gave him a scholarship for basketball, and he started playing football, and it was a very pass happy, season, and Demaryius Thomas kind of figured out how, to get his legs underneath him and be elite on the football field. And then the next year, a new head coach came in, implemented a running system, and it was going to be terrible for Demaryius Thomas. And instead of transferring or going somewhere else, he just stayed there and turned into the best damn blocking wide receiver Georgia Tech has ever had. And there are people like that get overlooked, but I think that in some cases, the reasons for them staying and, just not running away is something to admire all on its own. It's a reason to raise the draft stock. It's a reason to take that visit to Toledo and see the players on the field. And this next guy is a defensive end from Toledo. He is this year's Mr. Irrelevant, taken with the last pick in the last round. And this is Desjuan Johnson. 6'2". He's a hybrid. He can play outside or inside. Crazy good tape. He didn't do that great at the combine, the measurements, the 40-yard dash, whatever. But his tape tells a totally different story. His tape was very, very impressive. Having a player that can do both is very rare. And I put it again, he wasn't elite in the testing, but you just have to trust the tape. The Miami Dolphins, round 2, number 51 overall. Cam Smith, cornerback out of South Carolina. Very twitchy, bursts out of transitions. He's special, very well coached footwork. He has loose hips. The Dolphins have 2 very good corners in Jalen Hurts and Xavier. The only thing that Vic Fangio's defense, which I know entirely too well because Vic Fangio was our head coach, the only thing missing was if an offense runs trip left or trip right, which for people that don't know, trip right just means that you have 3 wide receivers left. They're loading one side of the field with 3 wide receivers. So in that case, trips left or trip right, the X receiver, Jalen Hurts, is to cover the slot, which is usually the X receiver. And that's because Jalen Hurts is really physical and he's good with press coverage and covering the slot. And they need a number 1 to play the passing strength. So they need him to play in space and explode and make tackles. In case, for instance, they do maybe the play where there's trips and then one of them backs up and catches the ball and then the other 2 become blockers. And they needed somebody that could come up and make that tackle, but also have the ability, if, all 3 go out and one of the dudes is, running a deep post corner, to turn his hips and fly downfield with him. So that's exactly what they got. I think that he is going to fit really great in this defense. He can press, but that's not what they're going to be asking him to do. And I think that he's going to have opportunities to get on the field early. And I think that he's going to use those opportunities and earn more snaps as the season goes on. So Cam Smith, cornerback out of South Carolina, I think we're going to know who that name is by the end of the year. And then the Vikings, staying with the cornerback. This was a really interesting one. Round 3, 102 overall. They got Mekhi Blackman, cornerback from USC. He's going to fit like a glove in Brian Flores' defense. He has the toughness you want to see out of a CB1. I almost said QB1. Cornerback 1. He's very feisty, competitive. He has the gas to stay on any receiver. The problem, he's very, very feisty, almost too physical. The NFL, they're going to call a lot of those, if you get past, the 5-yard mark, like you got to get off the receiver. There's some tape in college where if it was in the NFL, it would be called. So he's going to have to learn to, keep that feistiness, but also make sure that he's following the rules because it's the NFL. But One thing I thought was interesting, he has great acceleration. He was targeted often um, in the opponent's offenses. So he at USC, the teams that he was playing was often targeting him like week after week. But the other offense that we're going to play him in the future didn't seem to learn from the tape because he didn't like he had a great season and they just kept going after him, kept going after him. He had 17 forced incompletions along with 3 picks, so he's battle tested. Only gripe is he's not an amazing tackler, but he does stay in front of the play. So those are the only teams that I got down so far. Bill saying that he is back. So that is pretty much this as far as right now. That is as far as I have gotten with the algorithm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do every team and I'm going to just simplify it with the team and then the point score. And then I will organize it from 1 to 32. And that is going to be a lot more accurate than, what we got right now. And I'll tell you really quick, because I did Denver's. And really quick, Denver scored higher than Philly. Denver had 235 total points compared to Philly. And the Giants had 144.5. So the Broncos are up there too with tough schedules. Week 1, they played the Raiders. And I'll just, instead of telling you how, now that we've established how I've gotten these points, I'll just tell you what the total is. Raiders 7.5, Commanders 4.5, Dolphins 23, Bears 14.5, Jets 9.5, Chiefs 13, then the Packers 8.5, then the Chiefs again 9.5, then a bye week, then the Bills. That's our second highest score. The Bills, Monday Night Football. Denver is off of a bye week. That is helpful for Denver. So that's why I don't really care too much about the traveling. But then week 11, the Vikings, Sunday Night Football, back on prime time, back-to-back weeks. And then the Browns, 7.5, Texans, 11.5. The Chargers 16.5, the Lions 17.5, Patriots 7.5, Chargers 9.5, Raiders 11.5. There is a couple back-to-back away games, and we even have 3 away games in a row where we play the Texans, the Chargers, and the Lions. Those are, the lines are supposed to be pretty good, but it could be worse. We saw some of these other schedules. So Denver finished with 235, 21 hours of flight time to their away games. Still, less than the Giants and the Eagles. The Eagles have an entire 24 hours of flight time, and then the Giants were at like 28 hours. Bill goes, does primetime factor in at all? I really don't know. Just thought I'd ask. Yeah. I guess primetime could factor in a couple ways. The first way it could is primetime at home could give you more of a home field advantage. And then, of course, you have, if you're playing primetime on Thursday or Monday, then you're on a shorter week. I would consider that a disadvantage the next week. But yeah, I think when it comes to primetime, as much as I would be inclined to go, oh, Denver's at home for primetime, give them an extra point because it's a boost. Every team wants to play good on prime time. So I think in that way it's even. But yeah, that could be interesting. Like, maybe if you're prime time on the road, you have to add a point. Yeah, I'll think on that. Because great question. Great question. I do think for sure there needs to be something for teams coming off of a short week. If you have 4 days to prepare for an opponent, that's got to be accounted for. And so far I haven't added that yet, but I wonder how many games does the Giants have on Thursday night? Dallas. Oh, I didn't write the dates down. Probably one, I would imagine. And last thing before I go, I gotta get this off my chest. The NFL released a new rule that you could play on Thursday night twice. And Patrick Mahomes retweeted that he was upset about it, and whatnot. And I thought it was interesting because I got to say, this isn't the first year that teams can play twice on Thursday night. This has been happening for a while. And one example is last year, the Rams played, I think, week 13 or week 14. They played the Raiders on Thursday night. The Rams also opened up the season on a Thursday against the Bengals. So, look, the NFL is, I guess they're not counting that first one because there's no game before it. You know what I'm saying? So you have, technically it's an advantage in a way because you have all off season to prepare for the Thursday night game. And then you have, when everyone else only has 7 or 6 days to prepare for week 2, you're sitting there with 10 days to prepare for week 2. That's probably what I've been missing because I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, there's been teams playing on the season opener and Thursday night for years. And right here, live on camera, I figured out why the NFL doesn't count the season opener because there's really no disadvantage. But you throw a Thursday night in the middle of week 2 and week 4, it's a huge problem. So that's probably it. But it is worth noting that teams have been playing twice on Thursday for quite a while. And Bill said, we got like 6 primetime games if you want to count Christmas. Yeah, the Giants, I think, have 6 primetime games. Let me see something really quick. Let me see if I can see if there's a ranking of like the most primetime games to the least amount. Here we go. The Chargers have 6 primetime games in 2023. And they play week 16 on Saturday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills. Week 15 on Thursday night against the Raiders. Sunday night against the Ravens. The Jets on Monday night. The Bears on Sunday night. The Cowboys on Monday night. So, wow. There's 13 teams that have a maximum of 5 primetime games. Now, we did get more primetime games. If you feel like your team got a lot of primetime games and, you feel like it's a little bit more than usual, it's because this is the first year that the NFL changed the rule that every team doesn't have to have one primetime game. So it used to be no matter who your team was, you're going to be on primetime at least 1 week. Whether you're Cleveland, the Jags when they were bad, everybody gets one. This is the first year where they're doing away with that. They're like, to hell with that. We're not going to put you on primetime just so you get a game. We're going to put the best football on primetime. And I think a lot of people kind of appreciate that. So there are 12 teams that have a maximum of 5 primetime games. The Bills, the Bengals, the Broncos, the Bucks, the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Packers, the Patriots, the Steelers, the Rams, and the 49ers. So they're not even. Oh, that's 1 year ago. That makes sense. Here we go. 4 days ago. That said 1 year ago. Most primetime games. Okay, so number 1, the Chiefs. They got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then number 2 is the Chargers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The Cowboys have 6 as well. Or no, the Chargers have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6. I guess they're not counting the Giants' I guess they're not counting the Giants' Christmas game. That's kind of dumb because it's totally. I mean, that's prime time. The whole world's watching. Why would that not be considered prime time? The Texans do not have a single primetime game this season, which I'm a little surprised that they didn't get one just because C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. The Falcons do not have a single primetime slate. The Cardinals do not have a primetime game as well. That is crazy. The teams with the most are the Chiefs, Chargers, Bills, and Cowboys. And I believe my Broncos have 5, maybe 4. Because they got the Chiefs on Thursday night. That's their first primetime game. And then they got the Bills on Monday night. Then they got the Vikings on Sunday night. Then they got the Patriots on Christmas Eve at 5:15. So I guess they're counting that. And then they got the Lions and the Raiders game to be determined. So 4 primetime games right now. We'll see if any of those get flexed, because Denver got flexed in the wrong way last year. They were like, we are not putting that team on primetime anymore. And Bill goes, was not aware of the rule change on everyone gets a primetime game. Yeah, it was tweeted out along with another thing that there were certain games that used to belong to the networks. So like NFC teams would typically be on Fox, and AFC would get premiered on CBS. And it's kind of switched now where it's like a draft. Like any network can buy any game. And that's why you're seeing people this year, when you see like the game, it tells you, it's going to be on Fox. It's going to be on CBS. They're telling you that now because it was, it's not a given anymore. It's like the networks are trying to promote it. They're like, hey, we bought the Cowboys game. It's going to be on CBS, They paid enough money to get the game. They're probably going to make sure that they tell you what channel it's going to be on. So if you're seeing that a little more than usual this year, that is why. But I will continue to work on this strength of schedule thing. And next time I do it, I'm just going to, give you the list from 1 to 32. I'm not going to go through it. I just wanted there to be a reference point so I'm not just throwing out numbers. But if you're new to this channel, please subscribe and check out our other content. We are in the NBA playoffs right now. So if you are a Lakers fan or a Denver fan, you're probably enjoying that. So check out our other shows so you can stay current with everything going on in the playoffs, along with Kraken and everything going on there, with Seattle's new hockey team doing some great stuff. Baseball's going on. football's right around the corner, man. We're getting so close. I'm excited. I can almost taste it. That fresh cut grass, that September 10th feeling when the Broncos' first game is going to be against the Raiders. The Raiders have beaten us 4 times in a row, and it is time for the Raiders to go down. So that'll be a meaningful first game. The Giants are going to be playing the Dallas Cowboys. Are you kidding me? Man, can't we do that Green Day song and wake us up when September begins instead of ends? That would be pretty nice. But in all seriousness, guys, thank you for checking out this channel and making it your football channel. I hope you guys have a great day. I'm going to see you in 2 days for Only Football with Kyle, and then again on Thursday. And yeah, if you guys ever have any ideas or want me to go through a specific topic, or you're driving to work and you get an idea for something that you would like to see us elaborate on this channel, feel free to always send comments or DMs, whatever you guys want to do. We want to make sure that the people that are actually supporting and loving this channel are the ones that are getting what they want out of this channel as well. So as always, thank you guys, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. And until then, go Broncos. See